I never thought I'd live through the day I'd have to bury my own child. People tell you it's the natural order of things to lose your parents, maybe a spouse if life is cruel, but never your own flesh and blood. The morning of Carlton's funeral, I sat at the edge of my bed, his childhood bed, the one I'd moved into for comfort after the hospital took him away for the last time. The sunlight that slanted across the old quilt looked harsh and unfamiliar, like it belonged to a world that kept spinning in spite of my grief. I watched the dust motes dance, feeling so tired that my bones ached, yet sleep had become a stranger to me. I kept expecting Carlton to walk in, that sheepish, crooked grin of his, the same one he'd flashed when he was 6 and had painted the dog blue because he looked cold, Mom. That's what real grief is. It's not big, dramatic moments, but the little habits you forget to break. I still poured 2 cups of coffee every morning, just in case. I kept the window cracked because he always said the room smelled like old people and mothballs otherwise. The church was filled with faces I barely recognized. Some neighbors, old co-workers, a handful of distant cousins. But when the service started, I saw her, Cleo, my daughter-in-law. She was the picture of modern grief, black designer dress, sunglasses, perfect posture, her hands resting lightly on the heads of my grandchildren, Emma and Max. I tried to catch her eye, but she looked through me as if I were just another mourner, a faded part of the background, not the woman who'd sat by her son's bedside night after night. When the pastor began to speak, I heard only fragments: loving father, brilliant engineer, taken too soon, words that felt like they belonged to someone else. Carlton was more than that. He was the boy who built rocket ships out of cereal boxes and dreamed of walking on Mars. He was the man who called me every Sunday, even when Cleo said it was silly, even when he was sick and his voice sounded smaller every week. Emma squeezed my hand so hard my knuckles turned white. She's only 9, but there's an oldness behind her eyes now, a seriousness that makes me want to weep for the child she'll never be again. I wanted to pull her into my lap, cradle her like I did when she was a baby, but I could feel Cleo's gaze, cool, assessing, so I just gave her fingers a gentle squeeze and tried to keep myself together. After the service, people lined up to offer their condolences. Their words washed over me like static. He's in a better place. At least he's not suffering anymore. I wanted to scream that there was no better place for my son than here with me, with his children, but I just nodded and let the tears slide down my cheeks, silent and dignified, because that's what was expected. I found myself standing at the edge of the cemetery, watching the last shovelful of dirt fall over Carlton's coffin. I wanted to throw myself in after him, but I couldn't move. My legs felt rooted to the frozen ground. The air smelled of earth and flowers and something sharp, loss, maybe, if loss had a scent. That night, back at the house, the silence was suffocating. I wandered from room to room, running my hands over the backs of chairs, the framed photos on the walls, all the small pieces of the life we'd built together. I paused in the hallway outside Carlton's office, where the light under the door meant nothing now. I wanted to go in, but I couldn't. It felt wrong, like entering a museum dedicated to someone who used to exist. Downstairs, I heard laughter. Cleo was in the kitchen, her voice high and bright as she talked with her sister on the phone. I lingered outside the door, half hoping to hear her say something kind about Carlton, about me, about any of us. But all I heard was, "At least it's over. Now I can finally breathe." Something in me broke then, a soundless crack, like the ice on a winter pond. I pressed my palm to the cool wall, steadying myself. Was I just extra baggage now? I'd moved in to help with the kids when Cleo went back to work. I'd cooked and cleaned, stayed up with fevers, bought birthday presents, baked dozens of lopsided cakes for every school event. But none of it mattered. Not really. I thought of the last words Carlton ever said to me, so weak I had to lean close just to catch them. "Take care of them, Mom. Promise me." I'd promised, but I didn't know how I was supposed to keep that promise now. Not when the world had changed shape overnight, and I was already starting to feel like a stranger in my own life. I lay awake for hours, listening to the creaks and sighs of the old house. Every shadow on the wall looked like Carlton coming home. Every small noise made me want to get up, check on Emma and Max, make sure they were safe. But they weren't my children anymore. Not really. Not in the way they needed. As dawn bled across the sky, I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of cold coffee and stared at the calendar, still marked with Carlton's doctor's appointments and school plays that would never happen now. I realized then that this was only the beginning. I hadn't just lost my son, I was about to lose everything. I don't remember falling asleep. Maybe I never really did. There's a fog that settles over grief, a thick, numbing blanket that makes everything feel both too loud and too far away. By the time I heard the children shuffling downstairs, I'd already been awake for hours, tracing the fading patterns of sunlight across the old linoleum. Cleo moved through the kitchen with the precision of someone running late for a board meeting, never mind that it was Saturday. Her movements were brisk, her voice a string of clipped reminders. Emma, don't forget your shoes. Max, eat your breakfast. She didn't look at me as she poured coffee into a travel mug, her nails tapping against the porcelain like a nervous clock. I tried to offer help. Can I take the kids to the park this morning, let you have a few hours to yourself? The words felt hopeful, almost desperate. For a moment, I thought she might soften, but she just blinked at me with that practiced, polite smile, the one she reserved for cashiers and mailmen. No, that's all right. We have plans. Plans. I used to be part of those. I used to be someone whose presence was assumed, not questioned. I watched her herd the kids into the hallway, fastening jackets, tying shoelaces. Emma glanced back at me, her eyes wide and searching. I managed a smile, but it must have looked as brittle as it felt. The front door closed. The silence that followed was absolute. I stood in the empty kitchen, my hands hovering over the cooling coffee pot, and realized I had nowhere to go and nothing to do. My purpose, the daily rhythm I'd anchored myself to, had evaporated in the space of a slammed door. I wandered upstairs, driven by a need I couldn't name. Carlton's office looked untouched, dust motes swirling in the pale light. His chair was pushed neatly under the desk. The stack of books on the side table, his latest obsessions, a collection of poetry I'd given him for his birthday, a mug with a faded NASA logo, stood as if waiting for him to return. I reached for the mug, thumb brushing over the chipped rim. It still smelled faintly of his cologne, that clean, sharp scent I always associated with safety. You promised you'd stay, I whispered to the empty room. The walls didn't answer. They never do. It was mid-morning when I heard the garage door open. Cleo's voice floated up the stairs, cheerful and slightly forced. Kids, take your shoes off in the mudroom. Go wash up. I stood frozen in the hallway, not wanting to intrude, but unable to make myself invisible. She found me there, silhouetted by the weak winter sun. Naomi, we need to talk. My name sounded strange in her mouth, too formal, too distant. For a moment, I hoped she was going to thank me, maybe invite me for coffee, try to bridge the chasm that had grown between us. Instead, she folded her arms and leaned against the doorframe, her gaze sharp and appraising. It's about the house. Her voice was businesslike, cold. With Carlton gone, things are different. The kids need stability. And honestly, it's not healthy for them to see you this upset all the time. The words landed like a slap. I felt my face flush, my throat tightening around a protest I couldn't quite voice. I just want to help. I promised Carlton. She cut me off with a small, dismissive wave of her hand. I know. But the truth is, I need space to figure things out. I need you to start looking for somewhere else to stay. My ears rang. For a moment, I wasn't sure I'd heard her right. You want me to leave? Now? I'll give you a week. 2, if you need it. I know this is hard. But this is my house. The kids are my responsibility now. It's hard to describe what it feels like to become a burden in your own family. There's a physical sensation, a heavy, twisting ache that sits somewhere just beneath your ribs. I wanted to argue, to plead, but pride held my tongue. Of course, I managed. If that's what you want. She nodded, almost relieved. I'll help you find a place, if you need. I'm sure there are options. Her voice softened, just for a moment, as if she'd glimpsed the person I used to be before all of this. But then she straightened her shoulders and walked away, her heels clicking down the hallway. The conversation was over. So was my place in this house. I sat on the edge of the guest bed, my bed, though it never really felt like mine, and looked around at the quiet, ordinary mess of my life. A sweater draped over the chair. Carlton's old slippers by the dresser. Photos of the children in cheap plastic frames. How do you pack up a lifetime in a week? How do you decide what pieces of yourself to leave behind? I thought about calling my sister, but we hadn't spoken in years, not since the falling out over our mother's will. Old wounds, never quite healed, suddenly seemed trivial compared to this fresh, raw pain. Downstairs, I heard the clatter of dishes and the muffled sounds of children arguing over the TV remote. For a moment, I almost convinced myself that everything was normal, that if I just kept moving through the motions, I could hold on to what little I had left. But even the house seemed to reject me now. Every room felt colder, the walls somehow closer, the air thinner. I walked from window to window, pressing my palm against the glass, trying to memorize the view, bare trees, the neighbor's swing set, a patch of sky the color of bruised fruit. In the quiet that followed, I allowed myself to grieve, not just for Carlton, but for all the versions of family I'd lost, all the roles I'd played that no longer fit. I wept, silently and unashamed, for the future I'd imagined and the home that was no longer mine. By the time darkness fell, I knew what I had to do. Tomorrow, I would start packing. Tomorrow, I would begin to disappear. I thought packing would be mechanical, just folding clothes, wrapping a few framed photos, tucking books into bags. But it's nothing like that. It's a process of mourning in itself, a reckoning with everything I'd accumulated, everything I'd given away for this family, for the hope of belonging. Each object asked a question I wasn't ready to answer. What will you need, when you have nowhere to go? I started with the closet, reaching for my good winter coat, bought secondhand, but warm and practical. Carlton had laughed the first time I wore it, said I looked like a stylish New Yorker braving the cold. I could almost hear his voice as I smoothed the sleeves. Did I want to keep this for warmth or for the memory? There was only so much room in the suitcase. I took it anyway, even though the zipper stuck. The dresser drawers were a graveyard of little sacrifices. Gift cards I never used, saved for Christmas mornings that never came. A lopsided scarf Emma knit for me, too scratchy to wear but impossibly precious now. Old pay stubs, proof that I'd worked, that I'd helped pay the mortgage once. A faded ticket stub from the kids' first school play. I pressed it to my lips and closed my eyes, the scent of crayons and glue still vivid in memory. Every few minutes, I'd find myself staring out the window, watching the world continue as if nothing had happened. The neighbor kids tossed a football back and forth, shouting with the kind of wild, unself-conscious joy my grandchildren used to have. I wondered how long it would take before Emma and Max forgot about me, the way the world forgets the old when they outlive their usefulness. Cleo barely spoke to me that week. She moved through the house with the confidence of someone who's already begun to erase your presence. I caught glimpses of her in the hallway, phone pressed to her ear, discussing redecorating, paint swatches, opening up the space. I overheard her telling her sister, once Naomi is out, I can finally make this place feel like ours. The humiliation of it made my cheeks burn. I was a ghost, an inconvenience to be swept out with the dust. But beneath that humiliation, something else stirred, an ember of anger, of pride. I'd held this family together for years. I'd patched up knees, made casseroles from nothing, held my tongue during arguments, put everyone else's comfort before my own. Was this all I had left? A few suitcases, a stack of memories nobody wanted? That night, unable to sleep, I crept downstairs. The house was silent but for the ticking of the old kitchen clock, the one Carlton had rescued from a yard sale and insisted was vintage. I ran my hand along the countertop, remembering the birthday cakes we'd baked, the Thanksgiving dinners we'd ruined and salvaged. I opened the pantry and quietly took what food I could carry: crackers, peanut butter, instant coffee. Not much, but it would have to do. When I returned to my room, I found Emma standing in the hallway, rubbing sleep from her eyes. "Grandma, are you leaving?" Her voice was so small it nearly undid me. I knelt beside her, feeling the familiar ache in my knees. "Not yet, sweetheart. Just getting ready." She threw her arms around my neck and held on, as if she could keep me there by sheer force of will. "Don't go. Please." I squeezed her tight, swallowing the lump in my throat. "I don't want to go. But sometimes grown-ups have to do things that hurt, even when they don't want to. I promise I'll always love you, no matter what." She looked up at me, tears shining in her eyes. "Will you write to me?" "I'll write every week," I said, even though I had no idea where I'd be. It was a promise I needed to make, for her sake and mine. The next day, I packed the framed photos of Carlton, the graduation portrait, the candid one of him with chocolate icing smeared across his face at Max's 5th birthday. I hesitated over the family portrait Cleo had insisted on 2 Christmases ago. We all looked stiff, uncomfortable, but I kept it anyway. Proof, I suppose, that I'd once belonged. Filling the suitcases was a strange arithmetic. What would fit? What could I not bear to lose? I left behind the bulky things, the rocking chair I'd brought from my old apartment, Carlton's battered guitar, the blanket we'd all snuggled under on movie nights. I left the little television, too, even though it was technically mine. Cleo would find some use for it, I was sure. By Thursday, I was down to 2 suitcases and a canvas tote. It didn't look like a life, not really, just the detritus left after a shipwreck. Each time I zipped a bag, I felt like I was erasing myself a little more. But I forced myself to stand tall, shoulders back, the way my mother taught me when I was a girl. "Dignity," she'd said. "That's the one thing they can't take." On my last night, I sat on the floor and wrote a note to Emma and Max. I kept it simple, even though my heart was breaking. "Grandma loves you. Be good to each other. I'll see you soon." I slipped it under Emma's pillow, knowing it would have to be enough. As dawn approached, I took one last walk through the house, through my old life. I paused in the doorway of each room, letting the memories wash over me. Carlton reading to the kids on the sofa, Cleo laughing, once, a lifetime ago, Emma's sticky handprints on the fridge. I tried to fix it all in my mind, to carry it with me wherever I was going. When Cleo came downstairs, she barely looked at me. "Are you ready?" "I am," I said, and for the first time in days, I almost believed it. I thought leaving would be the hardest part, but it's what came after that nearly broke me. With everything I owned squeezed into the trunk and back seat of my old sedan, I drove through the empty morning streets, not sure where to go. I'd told Cleo I'd find a place to stay, but the truth was I didn't have any real options, just a vague hope that something would turn up, a friend of a friend, maybe a cheap room in a part of town that didn't make my skin crawl. I parked behind the all-night diner at the edge of town, its neon sign buzzing faintly in the dawn. I waited there for hours, watching the world wake up through the streaked windshield, dog walkers, delivery trucks, a couple of joggers with earbuds jammed in, moving to some private soundtrack I couldn't hear. Nobody looked at me, and for the first time in my life, I understood what it meant to be truly invisible. My car became my world. I folded the front seat back as far as it would go and tried to sleep, but the springs dug into my shoulder blades, and every sound made me startle awake. I'd never known how loud the world could be until I tried to rest with one eye open. Sirens, laughter, the low rumble of traffic, a stray dog scratching at my door. The nights were the worst. The cold settled into my bones, and I'd wrap myself in Carlton's old cardigan, breathing in the faint trace of him that still clung to the fabric. It was all I had left to make the dark feel less empty. The diner opened at 6. I'd drag myself inside, order a single cup of coffee, and nurse it for hours, grateful for the warmth, the bathrooms, the anonymity. Sometimes the waitresses would offer a refill with a sympathetic look, but I could tell they knew. They all knew. One night, I caught my reflection in the bathroom mirror, hair limp and unwashed, eyes hollowed out with exhaustion and hunger. I almost didn't recognize myself. I started to notice things I never had before, how quickly people look away from the homeless, how uncomfortable they become in the presence of someone who's lost everything. My old friends, my neighbors, people I'd known for decades, they'd pass by without a flicker of recognition, as if I'd slipped out of their memory the moment I stepped outside the boundaries of a proper life. One afternoon, while I waited in the library for the rain to stop, I spotted Emma and Max walking home from school with Cleo. I ducked behind a row of books, heart pounding, afraid they might see me, afraid they might not. When they disappeared down the sidewalk, I pressed my forehead to the window and let myself cry, not the silent tears I'd mastered, but big, ugly sobs that left me raw and empty. I wanted so badly to call out to them, to wave, to remind them I was still here. But I couldn't risk Cleo seeing me, couldn't risk making things harder for the kids. Sometimes, late at night, I'd drive past the old house. The porch light was always on, but it no longer felt like a beacon calling me home. I'd watch from the shadows as new furniture arrived, as curtains I'd sewn by hand were taken down and replaced. I saw Cleo in the kitchen once, laughing with a friend, her hair shining under the fluorescent lights. It hurt in a way I didn't have words for, the way she filled up the space I'd left behind. Food became a calculation. Crackers and peanut butter for breakfast, a free apple from the food bank if I got there early enough. Sometimes a hot meal at the church, where the volunteers handed out bowls of soup with cheerful smiles and didn't ask too many questions. I learned how to stretch $1, how to keep myself clean in public bathrooms, how to sleep sitting up without letting my head loll against the window. There was one bright spot in those gray weeks. Every afternoon, I'd drive past the schoolyard, parking far enough away that nobody would notice. I watched Emma and Max playing, laughing with their friends, chasing each other across the blacktop. It was a kind of torture, so close and yet so far, but it also gave me hope. They hadn't forgotten how to be children, not completely. I clung to that, to the way Emma threw her head back when she laughed, to the way Max's hair stuck up in the back, just like Carlton's used to. At night, I wrote letters I never sent, filled notebooks with memories and promises. Dear Emma, today I saw you skip rope with your friends. You smiled just like your dad used to, fierce and full of light. Dear Max, I'm sorry I'm not there to help you with your homework. I hope you know I'm cheering you on, always. Sometimes I'd write to Carlton, too, telling him about the moon rising over the parking lot, about how much I missed his terrible puns, about how hard it was to keep my promise. Every morning, I woke up certain that this was the day things would change, that I'd find a room to rent, a helping hand, a way back into the world of the living. But the days blurred together, each one a little colder, a little lonelier. Shame became my constant companion, a heavy cloak I couldn't take off. I learned to move quietly, to take up as little space as possible, to avoid drawing attention. Once, I saw my old friend Margaret at the grocery store. I started to call her name, but she didn't see me, her eyes slid right over mine, as if I were another shadow on the sidewalk. I realized then that I wasn't just a ghost in my own family. I was a ghost in my own town. But still, every night, I whispered to myself, tomorrow, I'll try again. And somehow, that was enough to keep going. It's strange how fast you become unnecessary. One day you're folding laundry, listening for the thump of little feet running through the house. The next, you're watching that same house through a car window, careful not to be seen. I used to believe family was forever, that you could always go home. Now I knew better. The first time I realized how truly disposable I'd become was on a chilly Friday afternoon. I'd stopped across the street from the old house, engine idling. I told myself I only wanted to see Emma and Max, to make sure they were okay, but what I really needed was to feel connected to something, even if only from a distance. Instead of laughter, I saw a dumpster parked in the driveway, one of those huge metal bins contractors use for renovations or clear-outs. Even from half a block away, I recognized the battered bookshelf sticking out from the pile. Carlton's shelf. The one I'd helped him build from pine planks the summer before Emma was born, sanded smooth by our hands, painted blue because he thought the room needed more color, Mom. Two men in work shirts hefted more furniture through the front door. Cleo stood in the driveway, arms crossed, phone pressed to her ear. She waved as they tossed boxes and a small table, Carlton's desk, where he'd written birthday cards and paid bills, into the bin. I watched as pieces of my son's life, and mine, were thrown away without a thought. I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles ached. The ache in my chest was worse. How quickly everything gets erased when you're not there to defend it. That evening, I found an open Wi-Fi signal behind the library and logged onto Facebook using an old phone. I shouldn't have looked, but I did. Cleo had posted a photo of the living room, stripped of color, white walls, chrome shelves, a single modern lamp. She stood in the middle, smiling, children at her side. The caption read, "Sometimes you have to clear out the old to make space for the new. Here's to fresh starts and brighter days." I scrolled through the comments, every one of them cheering her on. "You're so strong. Carlton would be proud. You're an inspiration, Cleo." I closed the browser, stomach twisted tight. Not a single word about me. No one wondered where I'd gone, or why the children's grandmother was no longer in the pictures. There's a particular kind of humiliation that comes when you realize you've been written out of your own story. I tried to tell myself it didn't matter. They were just things, furniture, books, souvenirs of a life that was already gone. But I couldn't stop thinking about Emma's handmade Christmas ornament, about the photo albums tucked in the sideboard, about the stories I'd told and the secrets I'd kept. How much of me was left in that house, waiting to be thrown away? That night, sleep wouldn't come. I curled up in the back seat, wrapped in Carlton's cardigan, replaying old arguments and half-forgotten slights. I remembered Cleo, years ago, smiling wide as she offered to take over Thanksgiving this year. "Naomi, let's make new traditions." I'd let her take more and more space, thinking I was being generous, never realizing I was giving up ground I'd never get back. The next morning, I went to the diner, hands shaking from hunger and something uglier, resentment. The waitress brought me coffee and a slice of toast. She didn't ask questions, but I saw her watching me, the way you watch a stray dog that might bite if cornered. For the first time since Carlton died, I let myself feel angry. Angry at Cleo for throwing me away. Angry at the world for making it so easy. Angry at myself for not fighting harder, for slipping quietly out of sight when I should have demanded to be seen. Shame and rage warred inside me, leaving me exhausted. The library was quiet that afternoon, the heat turned up just enough to take the edge off the winter chill. I sat at a table near the window, notebook open, pen poised above the page. I wanted to write a letter to Emma and Max, something fierce and beautiful, something that would remind them I existed. Instead, I found myself scribbling questions I couldn't answer. What makes a mother stop being a mother? What makes a family stop being a family? How do you prove you matter when everyone's decided you don't? I stared at the words until my vision blurred. Around me, college students tapped on laptops, a little boy read to his father, an old couple argued quietly over a crossword puzzle. all of them busy living, all of them visible. I felt like I was underwater, banging on the glass, screaming to be let back in. The days passed in a slow, gray drip. I went to the food bank, took whatever was left, day-old bread, a bruised banana, a can of soup with a dent in the side. I tried not to resent the volunteers' cheerful encouragement, their assumption that I was just passing through a rough patch and would be fine again soon. "It happens to everyone at some point," one of them told me, pressing a hand to my shoulder. I nodded, pretending to believe her. But at night, when the streets emptied and the cold pressed in, I whispered my anger into the darkness. I wasn't fine. I didn't want to be invisible. I wanted to matter, to be remembered, to be more than the ghost Cleo had turned me into. I swore to myself, shivering in the darkness, I wouldn't let her erase me. Not completely. Not without a fight. There's a kind of tired that seeps into your marrow, a fatigue that doesn't lift with rest. After weeks of surviving on coffee, canned soup, and the thin hope that things would turn around, my body felt hollow, my mind stretched thin. I stopped keeping track of the days. My sense of time shrank to the next meal, the next sunrise, the next memory that threatened to pull me under. It rained for 3 days straight, the kind of hard, icy rain that soaks you through even if you never step outside. The car windows fogged up, the smell of wet clothes and old sorrow thickening the air. I curled up on the back seat, knees drawn to my chest, Carlton's cardigan draped over me like a security blanket. I tried to remember the last time I'd felt warm. I couldn't. One night, around 3 in the morning, I woke to the sound of laughter, a group of teenagers walking home from a party, their voices bright and careless. For a moment, I envied them their ignorance, their certainty that life would always be good, that pain was something that happened to other people. I wondered when I'd last laughed without a catch in my throat. The next morning, my phone buzzed, battery nearly dead, but enough for one more call. I stared at the number, unrecognizable, and nearly let it go to voicemail. But some instinct made me answer. "Hello?" My voice sounded cracked, barely there. There was a pause, then a man's voice, measured, professional, but with an undertone of concern. "Mrs. Franklin? This is Mr. Alvarez, from Jensen and Alvarez Law. I was your son Carlton's attorney." The name hit me like a jolt. I sat up, heart pounding. "Yes. What is it?" "I've been trying to reach you for some time. There are matters regarding your son's estate that require your attention. It's urgent." Estate. The word felt foreign, sharp-edged. I'd assumed everything, what little there was, had gone to Cleo and the children. "I'm not sure why you'd need me." He hesitated. "Carlton left specific instructions in his will. Some of them pertain directly to you." A wave of confusion swept over me, followed quickly by suspicion. I glanced at my reflection in the rearview mirror, hair tangled, face pale and drawn. "I'm not in a position to come in right now." Mr. Alvarez's tone softened. "Mrs. Franklin, I understand this is a difficult time. If you can make it to our office, we can help with transportation, if needed. It really is important." The urge to hang up warred with the tiny spark of curiosity flickering inside me. Carlton had been careful, meticulous with details. Maybe he had left something behind, something Cleo didn't know about, something for the children, maybe even for me. "I'll try," I managed, voice trembling. "We're at the corner of Main and 7th. Please come as soon as you're able." After I hung up, I sat for a long time, hands shaking. Was this a trick? A final humiliation? Or had Carlton truly remembered me in the end? The thought sent a fresh ache through my chest. I made my way to the library bathroom, did my best to wash up, cold water, cheap soap, combed my hair until it lay flat. I wore the least wrinkled clothes I could find, smoothing them over my knees, desperate to look like someone who belonged somewhere. The law office was a world away from the diner and the food bank. Polished floors, quiet voices, the faint scent of leather and printer paper. Mr. Alvarez met me at the front desk, his face kind but unreadable. He ushered me into a small conference room, poured me a glass of water. "Mrs. Franklin, before we begin, may I ask, how are you doing?" No one had asked me that in weeks. I blinked, swallowing a lump in my throat. "I'm managing." He nodded, as if he understood more than I could say. Carlton came to see us several months before he passed. He made changes to his will. He left instructions, very specific instructions, for you, and for Emma and Max. My hands tightened in my lap. What kind of instructions? He slid a thick envelope across the table. "This is for you." He asked that it be delivered in person. There are also provisions for financial support, but, well, you should read the letter first. I stared at the envelope, Carlton's handwriting on the front. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I'd given up hoping for closure. Now, here it was, thick, real, undeniable. "Take your time," Mr. Alvarez said quietly, and left the room. My hands shook as I broke the seal. Inside, a letter in Carlton's careful script, and, surprisingly, a small, battered notebook. I unfolded the letter and read, my eyes filling with tears. "Mom. If you're reading this, it means the worst has happened. I'm so sorry I couldn't be there for you, for the kids. But I couldn't leave without making sure you'd be okay. I've seen how Cleo treats you, how you give and give. I've tried to talk to her, but I know you're too proud to ask for help. So I'm leaving you this, and a little more. The details are in Mr. Alvarez's hands. Please, Mom, don't let her shut you out. There's something else, too. I kept a journal the last year. Things I noticed, things I worried about. I hope it helps. I love you. I always have. Carlton." I pressed the letter to my lips, silent sobs shaking my whole body. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel alone. Carlton hadn't forgotten me. He'd left me something, maybe everything. I opened the notebook and began to read. Carlton's journal was slim and battered, its cover creased and soft from being carried everywhere. For a moment, I just held it, running my thumb along the edge, afraid that opening it might break the spell, afraid that whatever he'd written inside would make the loss feel even sharper, more final. I flipped to the first page. The handwriting was instantly familiar, small and neat. My boy always wrote like he thought someone else might need to read his words someday. March 14th, been thinking a lot about Mom. She's always there, helping, giving. Cleo gets frustrated, but I think she forgets how much we need Mom's steadiness. The house feels like it's full of secrets these days. I wish I could protect everyone, but I can't. I just hope they're kind to each other when I'm gone. Tears blurred the ink. I read on, devouring every entry as if it were a message from the other side. May 2nd, Cleo's been colder lately. She started talking about fresh starts, about not wanting the past to hang around. Sometimes she looks at Mom like she's already decided she doesn't belong. I want to say something, but I don't have the strength. I'm so tired, Mom. I hope you forgive me for not fighting harder. Some entries were just lists, reminders for himself, make copies of the will. Talk to Mr. Alvarez. Set up trust for Mom and the kids. The most recent entries were almost frantic, as if Carlton had felt time running out. August 19th, if you're reading this, Mom, I love you. I tried to protect you the best I could. Cleo doesn't know everything. The lawyer has the details. Don't be afraid to fight for yourself. For Emma and Max. You matter. I closed the notebook, hands trembling. The words filled the empty places inside me with something unfamiliar, validation, perhaps. I wasn't crazy. Carlton had seen it, too. The way Cleo pushed me out, the way she erased the parts of the family she didn't like. Mr. Alvarez returned, carrying a stack of official-looking papers. Did you have a chance to read the letter? I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. He sat across from me, folding his hands on the table. Carlton left instructions that, upon his passing, a substantial portion of his estate is to be placed in a trust for you and the grandchildren. It's more than enough to cover your housing, living expenses, and college funds for the kids. Cleo is provided for as well, but the bulk is set aside for you to manage, as guardian for Emma and Max. For a moment, the room spun. I don't understand. Cleo said everything belonged to her. Mr. Alvarez's eyes softened. I'm afraid that's not accurate. Carlton was very specific. If Cleo ever attempted to remove you from the family home, or to prevent you from seeing the children, custody, and control of the trust, would automatically pass to you. The words hit me like thunder. Custody. I thought of Emma and Max, of the empty house, of all the little ways I'd been made invisible. I was silent for a long time, trying to process the meaning, the possibilities, the sudden shift in power. Is that even possible? My voice was thin with disbelief. It is, Mr. Alvarez said gently. Carlton documented everything, conversations with Cleo, her plans, his concerns about the children. We have audio recordings, signed affidavits. If you want to pursue this, we can initiate proceedings right away. But you need to decide. Do you want to fight for them? The question echoed in the quiet office. Did I? I'd spent so long surviving, so long shrinking into the background, that I'd nearly forgotten how to say yes to myself. But now I could feel something inside me, coiling tight and hot, anger, yes, but also resolve. Maybe I'd been pushed aside, erased, but Carlton had believed I was worthy. Maybe that was enough. Yes, I said, my voice growing stronger. I want to fight for them. For Emma and Max. For myself. Mr. Alvarez nodded, as if he'd been waiting for this. Good. We'll need to gather some documentation, proof of your living situation, Cleo's behavior. There will be a hearing. I know it's daunting, but you have support now. Carlton made sure of it. For the first time in months, I felt something like hope flicker through the grief. This wasn't just about money, or even a house. It was about love. About refusing to disappear. I spent the afternoon signing papers, giving statements, answering questions. Each signature felt like a reclaiming, a stitch in the fabric of a life I'd nearly lost. When I finally left the office, the sky was bright and blue, the air crisp with the promise of change. That evening, I sat in my car with the windows down, notebook open in my lap. I wrote a new letter, this time, to myself. Dear Naomi. You survived. You are not invisible. You are not disposable. You are a mother, a grandmother, a woman with purpose. Tomorrow you will fight, not because you want revenge, but because you still believe in love. Carlton believed in you. Let that be enough, for now. As night settled over the parking lot, I allowed myself, for the first time in a long while, to feel proud. I spent the next 2 nights in a small, clean motel room, paid for by the trust Carlton had quietly set aside. For the first time in weeks, I showered without hurrying, scrubbed the dirt from my skin, watched as layers of fear and shame swirled down the drain. I slept in a real bed. My dreams, though, were crowded. Carlton's voice, Cleo's laughter, the sound of Emma and Max calling for me from somewhere just out of reach. On the second morning, I sat at the little desk by the window, the battered journal open in front of me. Sunlight spilled across the pages as I read deeper, searching for something I couldn't name, truth, maybe, or a reason for the gnawing anxiety that had taken up residence in my chest. June 5th, caught Cleo in the kitchen, talking to her sister on speaker. She said, when he's gone, I want the house to myself. Naomi will have to go, she's too much, always hovering. I pretended not to hear, but it scared me. Mom doesn't deserve that. She's saved us so many times. There it was, confirmation of everything I'd felt but never said out loud. Cleo's resentment, her impatience, the way she saw me as an obstacle instead of a partner. I kept reading. July 23rd, noticed Emma's gotten quieter. She misses her grandma, even when we're all in the same room. Cleo thinks she's clingy. I think she just wants someone who listens. Wrote more letters to Mom for her birthday. Not sure Cleo will let the kids give them to her. A sharp pang twisted in my gut. I'd always worried about Emma, her sensitivity, her habit of holding pain inside. How much had she lost, really, when I was forced out of the house? A few pages later, Carlton's handwriting grew shaky, as if he'd been writing through pain. August 11th, Cleo started making decisions without me. It's easier if I just handle it, Carlton. Found a box of old photos in the garage, pictures of Mom, me as a kid, holidays, messy birthdays. Next day, they were gone. She's erasing the past, and I'm too weak to stop her. I closed my eyes, pressing a hand to my mouth to stifle a cry. The sense of erasure wasn't just in my imagination. It was real, deliberate. Cleo had started removing me long before she told me to leave. There was more, evidence I'd never expected. August 28th, met with Mr. Alvarez. Set up recordings on my phone. Cleo's planning to move the kids to California after I'm gone. She says Mom will figure it out. I'm scared for the kids. If something happens to me, I want Mom to have everything she needs. She'll fight for them if she has to. She's the only one who can. My hands shook as I reached the final entries. Carlton had tried to protect us, even as his body failed. He'd anticipated the worst and left a paper trail, audio files, documents, conversations with lawyers. He'd trusted me to see it through. I spent the rest of the day with Mr. Alvarez, gathering evidence. He played the recordings Carlton had made, Cleo's voice, flat and practical, discussing plans to redecorate, to move, to limit my access to Emma and Max. There was no malice in her tone, just the casual certainty of someone who thought no one could challenge her. Is this enough? I asked Mr. Alvarez, my voice unsteady. Enough to protect the children? He nodded, eyes hard with resolve. It's more than enough. The court will take this seriously. Carlton's documentation is meticulous, he left nothing to chance. For the first time, the idea of facing Cleo didn't terrify me. I felt grief, of course, and a kind of sad compassion. But beneath it all was a fierce clarity. This was about Emma and Max now. They deserved a home where they could be loved, heard, allowed to grieve without being told to move on. That evening, I called my sister for the first time in years. Our last conversation had ended in bitterness, but now she answered, her voice soft with surprise and concern. Naomi? Is everything all right? I told her the truth, not all of it, but enough. She listened quietly, then said, You're stronger than you think. And you're not alone, not this time. Let me help. We made a plan. She would come for the custody hearing, sit by my side in court. I would not go to battle alone. In the quiet hours before dawn, I wrote another letter to Emma and Max, this one more hopeful than before. Dear Emma and Max. If you're reading this, it means we have a second chance. I want you to know I never stopped loving you, not for 1 second. Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes, and sometimes they're forced to do things that hurt. But family means never giving up on each other. I will always, always fight for you. I slipped the letter into the pocket of my coat, close to my heart. As I watched the first hint of sunrise spill over the rooftops, I felt something shift inside me, a gathering strength, a determination that went deeper than anger or grief. I was done being erased. I would not let Carlton's faith in me go to waste. Tomorrow, I would face Cleo. And this time, I would not back down. The courthouse was colder than I expected, all fluorescent lights and institutional gray. My sister met me at the door, squeezing my hand so tight it almost hurt. I tried to stand tall as we walked through the metal detector, tried not to feel like a fraud in my borrowed suit. My heart hammered in my chest, each step echoing with the weight of what was about to happen. Mr. Alvarez was already waiting in the small conference room, a neat stack of documents in front of him. "You ready?" he asked quietly. I nodded, but the truth was I'd never felt less ready for anything in my life. I kept thinking about Emma and Max, about what this day would mean for them, for all of us. I tried to remind myself that this was for them, not for revenge, not to punish Cleo, but to give the children the chance to be loved, really loved, in the way Carlton would have wanted. Cleo arrived flanked by her lawyer, lips pressed into a thin, stubborn line. She barely looked at me. The judge entered, and everyone stood. My hands shook as I took my seat, clutching the battered notebook in my lap. The hearing began. Mr. Alvarez laid out Carlton's wishes, his will, the trust, the evidence he'd left behind. He played recordings, Cleo's voice, calm and cold, discussing plans to move on, to cut ties, to relocate the children away from everyone they knew. The judge's brow furrowed. Cleo's lawyer objected, but the judge waved her silent. When Cleo finally spoke, her voice was sharp with indignation. I was trying to protect my kids. Naomi has always made things harder, not easier. She undermines my authority. She's not their mother. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw not the villain I'd built in my head, but a woman just as lost, just as scared, as I was. For a moment, my anger softened into pity. But then I thought of Emma's silence, Max's anxious glances, the way they'd both faded into the background since Carlton's death. I remembered the old photos thrown away, the bedtime stories cut short, the new house stripped of laughter. I spoke quietly, every word trembling with feeling. Cleo, I never wanted to take your place. I only wanted to help. Carlton wanted that too. He wanted his children to have every piece of love they could get. When you pushed me away, you pushed away their history, their safety net. You pushed away him. Cleo's face crumbled for the briefest second, but then the mask snapped back into place. You think you're better than me? You think you know what's best? No, I said softly. I just know what it feels like to be erased. To be made invisible in your own family. I won't let that happen to Emma and Max. The judge leaned forward. I've reviewed the will, the trust, and the evidence. Given the circumstances, and in light of Mr. Franklin's clear intentions, I am granting Naomi temporary custody of Emma and Max, pending a final review. Visitation with their mother will be arranged. Cleo gasped. For a moment, she looked years younger, frightened, alone. She turned to me, her voice trembling. Don't take them from me. I shook my head, tears pricking my eyes. I'm not taking them. I'm saving them. And you, if you'll let me. The judge called a recess. I staggered from the courtroom, the weight of the moment crashing over me. My sister caught me, held me tight, whispering, "You did it. You did it." But the victory felt hollow. There were no real winners here, only survivors. When I returned to the waiting area, Emma and Max were there, clutching the hands of a court-appointed counselor. Emma's eyes were red, her lower lip quivering. Max stared at the floor, fists clenched. I knelt down, gathering them close. It's okay. I'm here. We're going to be okay. Are we going home? Max whispered. Yes, sweetheart. We're going home. We'll make a new home together. Emma buried her face in my shoulder. Will Mommy still see us? Of course. She loves you, even when she doesn't show it the right way. The counselor nodded approvingly, but I could see the doubt in her eyes, the long road ahead, the scars we would all carry. Later, as we packed up my things and left the courthouse, Cleo caught up to me in the parking lot. Her voice was smaller now, brittle. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I wanted to move on. I couldn't look at you without thinking of him, of everything we lost. I looked at her, searching for anger, but found only sorrow. We all lost him, Cleo. But we still have each other. If you want to be a part of their lives, you'll have to show them you can change. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. I'll try. I swear, I'll try. I believed her, at least, I wanted to. Maybe we could find a new path forward. Maybe not. But for now, I'd done what I came to do. I'd kept my promise to Carlton. I'd fought for our family. That night, as I tucked Emma and Max into their beds in the small apartment my sister had helped me rent, I whispered a silent prayer of thanks. Tomorrow, we'd begin again. Tomorrow, we'd start the long, hard work of healing. And for the first time in months, I believed we might actually make it. The new apartment was nothing like our old house, and maybe that was a blessing. The walls were bare, the furniture a patchwork of thrift store finds and hand-me-downs, but there was space for Emma and Max to just be children. No one tiptoed around expensive rugs or worried about breaking something irreplaceable. In this small, sunlit space, we were all allowed to be imperfect. The first few days were a blur, unpacking boxes, grocery shopping, registering the kids for their new school. My sister stayed with us, lending her steadiness when my hands shook too much to sign the paperwork. Emma picked the bedroom with the window facing the sycamore tree, her doll collection lined up on the sill. Max claimed the smaller room, turning it into a fortress with blankets and cardboard boxes. I slept on the pull-out couch, grateful for every ache in my back that meant I was here with them. But the scars lingered, just below the surface. Emma clung to me at night, waking with nightmares she couldn't put into words. Max stopped talking for a while, communicating only in shrugs and angry glares. He carried his father's old baseball glove everywhere, as if the faded leather could keep him safe. I tried to be patient. I told myself healing took time, that wounds this deep didn't close overnight. But in the quiet moments, I was haunted by guilt. Had I failed them? Should I have fought harder, sooner? Had I been too willing to disappear, to let Cleo push me out? The questions kept me awake long after the kids had fallen asleep, shadows flickering across the ceiling as I replayed every choice, every silence. Sometimes, when the pain was too much, I opened Carlton's journal and read his words again. They steadied me, reminded me that I wasn't alone in my doubts. You matter, Mom. Don't let anyone tell you different. School started on a chilly Monday. Emma wore her bravest smile and a new backpack, holding my hand so tight my fingers went numb. Max walked a few steps ahead, head down, refusing to look back. I watched them disappear through the double doors, fighting the urge to chase after them and hold them close. The days fell into a rhythm: breakfast at the kitchen table, walks to school, afternoons at the park, dinners that ended in laughter or sometimes in tears. I learned to cherish the small victories: Emma's first new friend, Max finishing his homework without a fight, a night when no one woke up crying. But the setbacks hurt. One afternoon, Emma came home in tears, her favorite doll's dress torn. A girl at school called me a baby, she sniffled. She said I don't have a real family. I knelt beside her, smoothing her hair. Families come in all shapes, sweetheart. Ours is different now, but it's still real. You, me, Max, we're a family. And you're loved. That's what matters. She nodded, but her eyes were shadowed with doubt. Max struggled in his own way. He grew quiet and distant, lashing out when things didn't go his way. Sometimes I found him sitting alone in the dark, staring at the wall. When I asked what was wrong, he just shrugged. I miss Dad. I miss our house. I miss how things used to be. I wrapped him in my arms, holding him as tightly as I dared. I miss all of that, too. But we still have each other. And your dad would be so proud of you. One night, I heard him whispering to Carlton's old glove, secrets I wasn't meant to hear. I left him alone, hoping he'd find comfort in his own way. I struggled, too. Money was tight, even with the trust Carlton had set up. The court fees, rent, groceries, new clothes for the kids, all of it added up. There were nights I went without dinner so Emma and Max could have seconds. There were mornings I woke up panicked, afraid it would all be taken away. Through it all, I tried to create warmth. I cooked the meals Carlton loved, spaghetti with too much garlic, pancakes on Sundays with cinnamon and vanilla. We made traditions of our own, movie nights on the floor, story time in a pile of blankets, walks through the neighborhood to count how many squirrels we could spot. Slowly, the apartment began to feel like home. It wasn't perfect. Some days I lost my patience, raising my voice or snapping over spilled milk or muddy shoes. On those nights, I'd sit on the edge of their beds and apologize, reminding them that even grown-ups make mistakes. I tried to model what Carlton had always taught: love isn't about never hurting each other. It's about always coming back, always saying, I'm sorry, always choosing to stay. The biggest lesson I learned was to forgive myself. I wasn't superhuman. I couldn't erase the pain, couldn't fill every empty space left by loss. All I could do was show up, again and again, and love the children as fiercely as I loved their father. Late at night, when the apartment was quiet and the world felt less frightening, I'd write in my own journal. I'd list the things I was grateful for: a full pantry, a roof over our heads, a letter from Carlton tucked in my nightstand. I'd whisper thank yous into the darkness, not sure who was listening. Each morning, I woke with a little more hope. Not because things were easy, but because we were learning to live again, together, scars and all. Spring arrived quietly, as if it were tiptoeing through our lives, afraid to be noticed. The sycamore tree outside Emma's window put out new leaves, a soft green haze against the sky. I found myself waking earlier, drawn to the light that spilled across the kitchen floor, the promise that maybe, just maybe, things would keep getting better. Emma and Max changed in small but miraculous ways. Emma began singing again, softly at first, little snippets of the lullabies I'd hummed when she was small. I caught her teaching a friend to braid hair on the playground, her laughter ringing through the open window. Max took to riding his bike up and down the block, daring himself to go faster, the wind in his hair, Carlton's old baseball glove tucked in the basket. Sometimes, after dinner, he'd challenge me to a game of catch in the backyard. The ball stung my palm, but his grin was worth every ache. I noticed the changes in myself, too. The ache of loss was still there, but it no longer felt like drowning. Grief became a companion I walked beside, not a weight pressing me to the ground. There were days I missed Carlton so much I could hardly breathe. But now, I let the tears come, let the memories wash over me, trusting that I'd find my way back to shore. One evening, Emma crawled into my lap as I read in the living room. "Grandma," she whispered, "did Daddy ever get scared?" The question took me by surprise. I closed the book, pulling her close. "All the time, honey. He was scared of spiders. He was scared of thunderstorms. He was even scared the day you were born. He thought he'd break you, you were so tiny." Emma giggled. "He didn't, though. No. He learned. He got braver every day. Just like you and Max." She hugged me tight, her little arms strong. "I'm glad you're here." "So am I, sweetheart. So am I." Forgiveness crept into my heart when I least expected it. One Saturday morning, Cleo called. Her voice was uncertain, almost childlike. Naomi, can I see them this weekend? I made some mistakes, but I want to do better. For them. I hesitated, remembering all the hurt, all the nights I'd spent blaming her for everything that had gone wrong. But then I heard Carlton's voice in my mind, be kind, Mom. Try again. So I agreed. Cleo arrived with a bag of pastries and a bouquet of tulips. She hugged Emma and Max, awkward at first, then fierce. She sat at our kitchen table, her eyes filling with tears as she apologized, truly apologized, for the first time. She told them she loved them. She told me she was sorry. I believed her. Maybe not completely, not yet, but enough. After she left, Max asked, "Is Mom really different now?" I thought for a long moment. She's trying, Max. And sometimes, trying is the bravest thing a person can do. The new normal settled around us like a patchwork quilt, some pieces frayed, some freshly sewn, all of them precious. We cooked together, made up silly songs, burned pancakes, and ate them anyway. The apartment filled with noise and mess and the glorious chaos of living. I found joy in little things, the way sunlight glinted off Emma's hair, the sound of Max and his friends arguing over baseball cards, the feeling of coming home to a place where I was wanted. My journal entries shifted from lists of fears to lists of gratitude. I wrote about the meals we shared, the stories we invented, the simple fact of belonging. Money was still tight, but I learned to ask for help, to accept my sister's offers, to say yes when friends volunteered to babysit or bring groceries. The pride that once kept me silent became less important than the safety and happiness of Emma and Max. I realized that strength wasn't about doing everything alone. It was about letting others in, letting them carry some of the weight. One night, I lay awake listening to the children breathing in their rooms, feeling the thump of my own heart, solid and steady. I thought about forgiveness, not just for Cleo, but for myself. For all the things I'd gotten wrong, for every moment I'd let fear or pride keep me from acting. I promised myself I'd be better, not perfect, but present and real. Spring storms swept through the neighborhood, washing away the dust of winter. Emma stood at the window, counting the seconds between lightning and thunder. Max joined her, fearless now, each flash a reminder that fear fades when you're together. On a Saturday afternoon, we visited Carlton's grave. I brought fresh daisies and told him about Emma's song, Max's home run, the way we'd learned to laugh again. I told him I missed him. I told him I forgave him, too, for leaving, for not saying enough, for being human. As we stood in the soft sunlight, I felt the children slip their hands into mine. We were still a family. Changed, but whole in a way I'd never expected. I looked up at the sky, blue and endless, and let myself believe that we were going to be okay. We were living again, messily, bravely, together. 6 months after the day I lost everything, I woke before dawn, the air heavy with the promise of summer. I lay in bed for a while, listening to the hush of the apartment, the comforting creaks and sighs that meant the world hadn't ended after all. When the sky began to lighten, I crept into the kitchen and made pancakes, Carlton's recipe, with too much vanilla, the way Emma liked. The kids wandered in, Max in mismatched pajamas, Emma with her favorite stuffed bear tucked under one arm. We ate together at the little table by the window, sunlight painting gold across the linoleum. I watched them argue over syrup, laugh at an old joke, tease each other with the easy affection that only siblings share. They looked happy. Not just getting by, but truly, unmistakably happy. After breakfast, I found an envelope on the doormat. It was from Cleo. Inside was a simple card and a photograph, Emma and Max at the park, faces flushed with excitement, Cleo beside them, hair wind-tangled, all three grinning. She'd written, "Thank you for giving me another chance. I promise I won't waste it." I tucked the card away in my journal and wiped tears from my cheeks. Forgiveness had been a journey, one I never thought I'd make, not after the coldness, the hurt, the months spent invisible. But I'd learned that forgiveness wasn't about forgetting, or pretending nothing happened. It was about choosing to move forward, about not letting bitterness decide the future. I'd forgiven Cleo, and, slowly, I'd forgiven myself. Later that morning, we walked to the park. The sycamore trees were lush and full, casting wide pools of shade on the grass. Emma raced ahead, her laugh clear and wild, Max trailing after her with a battered baseball and glove. I sat on a bench and watched them play, my heart full and aching in the best possible way. Sometimes, the past tried to intrude, a flash of guilt, a shadow of doubt. I let those feelings come, then let them go, like waves against the shore. I'd carried so much grief, so much shame and fear. But I realized now, I'd also carried strength, resilience, and the kind of love that stitched broken things back together. My sister joined us at the park, bringing lemonade and stories about her latest adventures. We talked about plans for the summer, day trips, picnics, new memories waiting to be made. Emma climbed into my lap, sticky fingers and all, and whispered, "I like our family the way it is. I like you, Grandma. I don't want you to ever leave." I hugged her close, breathing in the sweet smell of her hair, the innocence that somehow survived everything. "I'm not going anywhere, baby. I'll be here for as long as you need me." That night, after the children were asleep, I sat by the open window with Carlton's journal in my lap. I read his words again, feeling the warmth of his love stretching across time and distance. For the first time, I didn't cry. Instead, I smiled, imagining his pride, his relief that we'd found our way back to each other. I thought of all the lessons these months had taught me, that strength isn't the absence of weakness, but the courage to keep going, to reach out, to start again. That family isn't just blood, or who shares your last name, but the people who hold your hand when you can't stand on your own. That love isn't perfect, but it is enough. The next morning, the kids bounded into the kitchen, eager for pancakes and the promise of a new day. The apartment was alive with sound, Emma's singing, Max's laughter, the music of ordinary life. I looked around at the clutter, the mismatched chairs, the photos taped to the refrigerator, and felt a quiet pride. I had lost so much, yes. But I'd found something even more precious, myself, whole and unashamed. As I packed their lunches and wiped syrup from the table, I whispered a thank you, to Carlton, to the children, to the woman I'd become. I knew there would be more storms, more hard days, but I also knew we would weather them. We were together. We were loved. Outside, the sun rose higher, bathing everything in gold. I stood at the window, watching the world wake up, and realized we'd come full circle, not to where we began, but to someplace new, and maybe even better. Love endured. Family endured. I endured. And in that quiet kitchen, for the first time in a very long time, I felt at home.